good Mourvèdre has to see the sea. It gets the salinity, it gets the saltiness. So even if in Bandol you get very little rain, like 400 or 500 milliliters of rain per year, you get the wind blowing all the time. There's a lot of speculation that the wind also carries salt from the sea, which goes over the grapes. So there's a salinity, there's a freshness in the wines, even though they don't have acidity. And it's particular to the Bandol area. I also had a very good Mourvèdre recently in South Africa. The winemaker said to me, yeah, because our Mourvèdre can also see the sea. I think that's a big part of it.
Do you have a thirst to learn about wine? Do you love stories about wonderfully obsessive people, hauntingly beautiful places, and amusingly awkward social situations? Well, that's the blend here on the Unreserved Wine Talk podcast. I'm your host, Natalie McLean, and each week I share with you unfiltered conversations with celebrities in the wine world, as well as confessions from my own tipsy journey as I write my third book on this subject. I'm so glad you're here. Now pass me that bottle, please, and let's get started. Welcome to episode 250. Why is Bandol the only wine region that leads with the grape Mourvèdre? What would surprise you about the northern Italian grape and wine Barbaresco? And what would it be like to spend a day picking grapes in a Sauvignon Blanc vineyard? In today's episode, you'll hear the stories and tips that answer those questions in part 2 of our chat with Dr. Andy James, who has just published a new book called Bandol Wine and the Magic of Mourvèdre. You don't need to have listened to part 1 from last week first, but I hope you'll go back if you missed it after you listen to this one. 3 of you are going to win a personally signed copy of Andy's new book. All you have to do is email me at natalie@nataliemclean.com and tell me that you'd like to win a copy. I'll choose 3 people randomly from those who contact me. I'm excited to share with you that I have 3 new launch events for Wine Witch on Fire, Rising from the Ashes of Divorce, Defamation, and Drinking Too Much. I'll be hosting a tasting of 3 really top-notch Clausen Chase Vineyard wines in Prince Edward County on Thursday, September 28th at 5 p.m. Our host is Sonia Smits, the owner, and award-winning actor whom you may recall from the terrific TV show Street Legal. Signa Langford, columnist for the Toronto Star, will interview me about the issues in the book, and then we'll have an open Q&A discussion, followed by a book signing, followed by more wine. Join me and make it a weekend getaway at this beautiful time of the year in the heart of wine country. Get your tickets at clausenchase.com. Then on Sunday, October 1st at 7 p.m., I'll be hosting an event as part of the Toronto International Festival of Authors. The festival will take place by the water at the lovely Harbourfront Centre and features literary giants such as Margaret Atwood, Vincent Lamb, Emma Donoghue, Sarah Polley, Alyssa York, Charlotte Gray, and others. I'll be leading a tasting of 2 wines, and then sommelier and writer Rebecca Muir will interview me about the book, followed by a Q&A discussion and signing and more wine. Get your tickets at festivalofauthors.ca. Your ticket includes all events happening that day. And finally, I'll be chatting about the book and leading, yes, another wine tasting at the Ottawa Writers Festival on Friday, October 27th at 6 p.m. Registration for that event will go live this Friday at writersfestival.org. Please let me know if you can join me at one or more of these events. I'd love to hear from you. Also, let your friends, family, and colleagues know about them. I'll include links to all of the events in the show notes at nataliemclean.com/250. And now here's a review from Jennifer Kingsbury in Calgary. This is a heart-wrenching and incredibly vulnerable memoir of a person whose life literally went upside down with divorce, health issues, and personal and public attacks on her integrity as a woman in a male-dominated industry. I am a scientist, so I understand that part, and I know the pain that Natalie goes through. Some industries still have a long way to go as far as equality is concerned. This was not an easy read, and there are a lot of emotional scenes, but Natalie has the wit and charm to make the reader laugh in those lighter moments. Thank you, Jennifer. If you've read the book, I'd love to hear from you at natalie@nataliemaclean.com. If you haven't got your copy yet and would like to support it and this podcast, please order it from any online book retailer, no matter where you live. Every little bit helps spread the message. I'll put a link in the show notes to all retailers worldwide at nataliemaclean.com/250. Okay, on with the show. So why is Bandol the only French appellation where the Mourvèdre grape is dominant? Why aren't there others? Why is this a specialist of the region?
Yeah, that's a good question, Natalie. I didn't really understand it myself for a long time, but the appellation next door to Bandol is a huge one called Côte de Provence. As I'm sure you know, and Côte de Provence also has Mourvèdre. They can use Mourvèdre, and they do, but it's more Grenache, and so Syrah, Carignan. And so Mourvèdre from Côte de Provence is not very interesting. I don't know exactly the reasons why, but one thing for sure is that in Côte de Provence, for example, they can irrigate, and they do irrigate. They have mostly inland vineyards, so they're flatter, and they irrigate, they have higher yields. So the Mourvèdre is totally different there. There's no tension, there's no power, and sort of, how would I describe it? It doesn't really go the distance.
Right. They're watering it down, literally, like giving it an easy life, whereas you said grapes need to suffer. They need to be challenged.
Yeah, and even the ones that don't get that royal treatment in Côte de Provence, they just don't have the complexity that Bandol does. So I think a lot of it has to do with the sea. They have a saying, they say that good Mourvèdre has to see the sea.
Huh. I wonder what it gets from the sea.
Or maybe have its feet. Well, it gets the salinity, it gets the saltiness. So even if it doesn't rain, in Bandol, you get very little rain, like 400 or 500 milliliters of rain per year. So a very small rainfall, but you get the wind blowing all the time. And there's a lot of speculation that the wind also carries salt from the sea, which goes over the grapes. So there's a salinity, there's a freshness in the wines, even though they don't have acidity. And it's particular to the Bandol area. I also had a very good Mourvèdre recently in South Africa. I was in South Africa for a wine conference, and they had Mourvèdre there, and I was very impressed. And the winemaker said to me, yeah, because our Mourvèdre can also see the sea.
Okay. Wow.
So, right. I think that's a big part of it.
Yeah, okay. And what are your favorite pairings when it comes to Mourvèdre? What do you like to have with a glass of Mourvèdre? The red kind.
Well, if it's a rosé.
Oh, okay. Start with the rosé. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I have a few. I guess, starting with the rosé, I would say baked fish is a big one. I like to do, say, baked white fish with lemon and garlic and rosemary. That's always a favorite. I also like ratatouille. It's very nice. Ratatouille with that. I also like oysters, all kinds of shellfish, chicken, carbonara pasta. It can really go with a lot of things.
Sure. And the big reds?
Pepper steak is great. What else would be good? Yeah, we had a lot of magret de canard, the duck breast in Bandol.
Okay.
That was a real favorite. So duck breast in an orange sauce.
That sounds good.
Yeah.
And you also had a story when you were picking in the Sauvignon Blanc vineyard. You spent a half day picking. What were you doing there? Was this in Bandol as well?
Yeah. It was in Bandol, and I was wondering what I was doing there. What had I done to deserve that half day in the vineyard?
Do you mean that
it was
positive
quite a horrible
or negative
experience.
Hard work, not punishment?
It was rather trying because I had spent 4 days picking in a different vineyard with my wife, and we accepted the invitation to try picking in this Sauvignon Blanc IGP table wine vineyard at another winery for a half day. And in Bandol, they only pick for a half day because it's too hot. So they start at 7 o'clock in the morning and they go to 12 o'clock or to 1 o'clock in the afternoon and call it a day. Because if you keep picking in the afternoon, the acidity in the grapes goes down.
Right. And
it's so hot, like 30, 35 degrees, that the grapes can also become oxidized before they get to the cellar. So
wow.
It wasn't just my choice to only do a half a day.
Okay.
It was a full day. So I wanted to experience, what things are like in this IGP vineyard, because basically I had been told that Bandol is really special because the yields, the amount of grapes that you can take, that you can grow in a hectare of the vineyard is like 40 hectoliters per hectare. And for an IGP, it's 100, so more than double. You can irrigate in the IGP, in the table wine one, but you can't irrigate in Bandol. Lots of differences like that, the green harvest. So I thought, okay, I'd really like to try harvesting and see what it's like. So when I got to the vineyard with my wife, it was just a wall of green, which you wouldn't see in a Bandol vineyard because, of course, they can't water, so you don't get as much foliage. But also you have to do a green harvest. You have to trim and cut and get rid of a lot more grapes. So it was just a wall of green, and I had to penetrate the wall of green, which is really kind of prickly. You've got gloves on, but still it's pretty tough. And then try to pry the grapes away from the tree and then cut them and put them into your basket. Now, I'm getting old, Natalie, so my back was killing me after 4 days of picking before. And every time I bent over, it was like just a wall of pain was going through my back. So I tried kneeling, but if you kneel, you have to get up again, and then you have to, move over a little more, and that's really tiring. So I thought, well, I'll try sitting down, and then I can reach out with both arms, and I can, pick the grapes in, say, a 2-meter radius, and then I'll scuttle over like a crab to the next area. I thought I was onto something here. And after about 5 minutes, the forewoman who's standing on the back of a flatbed truck with her arms crossed, she bellows out from across the vineyard. She says, "No sitting!" And
Sounds
I
tough.
turned to the German woman beside me who was picking, and I said, "I'm a volunteer, I don't get paid for this."
Doesn't matter.
She was pretty serious. Doesn't matter. Yeah, you're setting a bad example. So it was a tough experience, because really it's just overgrown with grapes. And you can really see the difference just in the grapes if you eat them, because it's like eating grapes from the supermarket.
Huh. So this was a green harvest?
If you know what I mean. You buy a bunch of green grapes to eat.
Yeah. And were you doing
there's
a green
no green
harvest?
harvest for that.
Oh, okay.
They
So
grow as many grapes as you can.
Oh, wow. So they were going to use this in table wine.
This was the harvest.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Wow.
This was going right into the tank. Yeah.
And what does IGP stand for?
It's indication of indication. It's indication de géographique protégée. So it's a protected geographic indication. It means basically table wine. It's a new fancy name they use in France for table wine. And what it means is that you can grow just about any grapes you want. You can irrigate, you can age it however you want. But they will say it's IGP from Bandol. Like it doesn't say Bandol, but it has the name of the region that includes Bandol.
Okay. Okay, great.
So the region is delimited, but there's basically no rules.
Huh.
It's table wine.
Okay, gotcha. All right. And so there were some famous residents who lived in the town of Bandol, some back to writers again. Tell us about them.
So it was interesting for me, this experience, just to follow that up, just because another winemaker had told me, he said, I often tell the visitors to the winery that the difference between a table wine and a Bandol wine is that the grape in a table wine vineyard is a lazy grape. He just sits there and gathers up the sun. It's nice and flat and fertile. He gets lots of water. He has an easy life. And then the Bandol grape is the worker. I mean, he has to really work to get his water. He's living on these extreme slopes with not very much soil. The sun is beating down on her, and it's a tough life. So the Bandol wine grape is the worker, and the table wine grape is the lazy couch potato.
I love that comparison. And there were a couple famous resident writers in the town. Who were they?
Yeah, well, D.H. Lawrence is probably the most famous one for English people because D.H. Lawrence is pretty well known for his novels, but he went to Bandol twice, and basically for convalescence, but also because his wife, Frida, was German, and this was at the time when there was a lot of backlash against Germans in England. So they found it much easier to live in the south of France. And he wrote a few stories and some poems in Bandol. He said something along the lines of, he liked the food a lot, but the people not so much.
Give him another glass of wine.
Yeah. So he was one, and then Catherine Mansfield as well. She came 1917, I believe, because her brother had been killed accidentally at the front in World War I by friendly fire. And so she went to Bandol to recover from the shock of this and spent about 3 months. But there are several famous people who have stayed in Bandol for a year or months, and their names and plaques are on various houses around in the town.
Wow, cool. All right, let's switch regions now. You interviewed Angelo Gaja, famous Italian winemaker from Piedmont. You spent 5 hours interviewing him in Japan. What did you learn from him? What did you take away from that?
Yeah, well, actually, I interviewed him in Barbaresco. I went to Barbaresco and met him there. So It was 5 hours. Yeah, it was wonderful. I guess the big thing about Mr. Gaja is that he's just a very humble person. And you don't meet a lot of people like that who are so humble, so genuine in the wine world. I don't think he really has an ego. He just is a tireless promoter and a worker for making his Barbaresco wines and the Nebbiolo grape, making them known throughout the world. So he takes time. He's now 82 years old, I believe, and he's not retired at all. But he was just amazing. He told me all about how much he loved Japan. He told me about coming to Japan and walking through a park and hearing the cicadas and some experiences he'd had with Japanese food. And I just was really impressed with somebody who is so accessible and so passionate. It was a wonderful experience.
And how did you talk and tasted about Barbaresco, which is a lighter red wine that among many that he's famous for? How has it changed?
Well, I mean, Barbaresco and Barolo were the two most famous regions, as you know, that are right next door to each other, and they both use the Nebbiolo grape. So it has, of course, with global warming, with climate change, the wines have probably gone up 1 or 2 notches in alcohol. So maybe 25 years ago, the standard would have been 13.5% alcohol. And now you regularly have 15 or 15.5.
Wow.
I think also what has happened in a good sense, in a really good sense, is that you see that people have really updated their techniques in the vineyard and also in the cellar. So you don't have your grandfather's old stinking oak barrels that should have been discarded decades ago and are infecting your wines with all kinds of crazy bacteria. Those problems have been solved. You have a lot of techniques now in the vineyard to introduce freshness into the wine. You have everybody doing basically organic wine growing, a lot of biodynamic wine growing, winemaking as well. So I think the wines are getting better and better, but the challenge still is the extreme weather.
Right.
They have, months and months with not a drop of rain. They have a lot more heat than they used to have. So what do? And they're looking at, say, planting grapes on northern facing slopes that would have been considered until now to be areas where you planted, say, Barbera or a lighter variety or white grapes. And now they're even thinking about planting maybe Nebbiolo.
Yeah, because famously the southern slopes were always the prestigious bottles, whether it was Italy or France or whatever. You knew the south facing because it would get the early morning sun, but also not the harsher western sun or whatever. I'm getting all my geographies mixed up. But yeah, that is changing, that they're actually going to go with northern exposure for less heat, less sun with climate change. Yeah.
Yeah, and a lot of them also are doing grafting too now. So they graft, they identify really sturdy, good Massal selection vines, the vines that are like from pre-phylloxera times or are not clones, ones that have been used and have been replanted over and over, but they're not using the clones anymore. They're trying to get vines that can be drought resistant, that have more individuality than the clones. So there's a lot of things going on that they're trying to do, and they're doing better and better wine.
That's great. Good to hear. So speaking of wine, let's taste. What 2 wines do you have with you today?
Wow, yeah. Do you want to start with a rosé?
Sure. Tell us about it. Maybe hold it up to the camera there. We'll also put a link in the show notes so that people can see which wines and possibly maybe find them. Okay. Oh, nice and pale.
Okay, so this is the...
All right. And
this is my Bandol. It's called Le Galantin.
Okay.
And it's Domaine Le Galantin is from Bandol. And it's a 2020 rosé, so it's now 3 years old. Promising.
Yeah.
It's not the rosé of the year.
Right. That's true. And how does it taste?
Well, we'll try it right now and see.
Okay.
I thought I would show you what I usually do with rosé.
Oh, that's a big
rosé
glass.
white is,
a big bowl
I
glass,
like this glass.
that I associate with Pinot Noir, but you're using it for rosé. Yeah.
Yeah, this is from Lehman's Synergy white wine glass.
Huh.
And I use this a lot for rosé and for white, unless it happens to be a Riesling or, for example, an unoaked Chardonnay. I mean, something that you want to emphasize the structure more.
Okay.
Minerality, for example. So if you really want the wine to expand and to get all the aromas collecting, this is what I like.
Huh. We'll have to link to that glass too in the show notes. I'll follow up with you after our chat because I'm intrigued by that glass. It's got, for those who are just listening to the podcast, nice round bowl, then it comes up a bit more tightly at the top. So it's concentrating those aromas. Lovely.
Yeah.
And so what do you get from
really
this?
Nice glass.
Yeah. What do you get from that?
Well, it's now 3 years old. And what's happening with a good Bandol, always happens with a good Bandol Rosé, is that you get the fresh fruits turn into more sort of, I wouldn't say candied fruits, but almost like an overripe. This is a peach aroma, but it's more now like an overripe peach. So you get that, a little bit of candied aroma. And in the mouth, it's much rounder than it was before. It's a little bit soft, but there's still tension there. And it's really quite round, almost chewy, which is a really indescribably pleasurable experience. Some people don't like it so much. They prefer the freshness and the vitality in a 1-year-old or 2-year-old rosé. But as it gets older, it gets round, which I like.
And by rounder, is it kind of losing its acidity, or the fruit is blossoming more and the acidity or perception of it is going down? Is that what's happening?
There's not much acidity to begin with.
Okay.
And that's something that's very hard to understand. Some winemakers would tell me that they would measure the acidity and it's really quite negligible, but it feels like it has acidity. And this is coming from the minerality, from the salinity. It has a sensation of a mineral freshness, which kind of tricks your mind into thinking it had more acidity than it does. I think it's probably just the vibrant fresh fruit becomes a little bit plumper over time. Okay. I can't really describe it any better than that.
No, that's good. That gives us a sense of it. And then what is the second wine that you have?
This moving on so quickly. Well, I was going to take another sip of this one. Okay.
We've got a schedule here to maintain, Andy. Just kidding.
That's
I'm
true.
curious about the
Natalie.
other one.
Okay. The other one is a Barolo.
Okay.
And it's a GD Vajra.
Okay.
Barolo from the Rivera crew, which is in Novello. So I'll just pour a little bit of this one.
And again, we'll link to that in the show notes. Now you've got another odd-looking glass that is fascinating. This one is a bit curvy. Is this the same company?
This is Riedel's Wine Wing series. And this is a glass made for Nebbiolo and also Pinot Noir. They recommend either one. I like it. It's really good, again, for letting the wine breathe, which not only Mourvèdre, but also Nebbiolo likes to breathe.
Yes.
But it also collects the aromas quite nicely.
At the top, yeah. I wonder why they put that little curvy thing in. It's almost like there's a waistline gathering and then it goes out again with the small hips. I don't know what that's doing for the wine. Maybe agitating it as you swirl it or something. I don't know.
Yeah, I think it encourages aeration, But for the listeners out there who are a little bit skeptical, I mean, if you had, say, for example, a Pinot Noir glass, that might work okay. Like the Pinot Noirs that sort of go up like this.
Yeah, the bowls. Yeah.
But I think with Nebbiolo, it likes to breathe a little more. So I like this one being a little more open.
Open at the top, yeah.
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 And if you have a Cabernet Sauvignon glass, it tends to be a little bit narrower and more constricting.
Yes.
And I don't think it works as well with Nebbiolo. It really needs to stretch out its limbs and express itself.
Yeah, absolutely. So you have a taste of that. I think they called Nebbiolo the Pinot Noir of Piedmont. I don't know if it's or if I'm mixing that up with something else. But it's expressive.
Yeah, they say Barolo is the king of wines and the wine of kings.
Okay, right.
So
what do you
I feel
get
like a king tonight.
Okay. Yes, I know. You're in Tokyo, so you're 13 hours ahead of me. So it's morning my time when we're recording this. So thus I'm sticking to water, but you're just getting warmed up for your evening. Yeah. I just cannot stomach a Barolo before breakfast. That might be a book title, Barolo Before Breakfast.
Yeah, maybe.
So what are you getting for that wine?
Well, this is quite savory in the nose. It's quite herbal, really lovely, sort of a heather aroma combining with sweet tobacco, cherries. You have, not always, but almost always in Barolo, you can find tar and roses. And it sounds like a rock band, right?
Yeah, it does.
Tar Roses, but not quite. But it's really a nice series of combinations there, sweet and sour. And then in the mouth, what I really love about Barolo the most is in the mouth. It's quite savory. It has a balsamic element to it, good acidity. It's rich, but it never feels heavy, which is really an incredible thing because this wine is 14.5%, but it doesn't feel like that. It feels very light until you swallow it, and then you get the tannin kicking in, and it's quite a nice drying finish, but it is a powerful finish. So it's a lovely wine.
Interesting. Wow.
I wish you could join me for a glass.
Yes, I wish I could, but later. And what would you pair with that?
For Barolo, I like steak again. I like beef, but
Sure.
one of my favorite ones is probably risotto. Porcini risotto. Mushroom risotto is great with Barolo.
Lots of umami and some of the wild, feral, fungal kind of aromas you sometimes get in Barolo and northern Italian wines. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Truffle accented risotto is also beautiful, I find, with those wines. Not the chocolate kind, of course, but the fungi kind.
Yeah.
Okay, so I can't believe how fast time has flown. So let us go to our lightning round. You can keep sipping if you like, Andy. But
okay.
Is there something that you believe about wine which others disagree?
Well, I guess the one thing that I mentioned earlier is about decanting. I don't think that decanting really serves much of a purpose. I told you about my grandmother theory. With older wines, often you meet Americans, maybe Canadians are guilty of this too, but there are a lot of Barolo lovers and in Canada and the US, and they often talk about double decanting and triple decanting. I guess they really want to make sure the wine is perfectly awake and expressive when they drink it. What I like to do is to see the wine evolve over 2 or 3 hours of drinking a bottle slowly with my wife, having it with a meal. And as I said, you can open it up a day before if it's a powerful wine, and then drink it slowly. So I become a convert to that way of thinking as opposed to the decanting. Except for, say, Cabernet Sauvignon, like a Bordeaux wine that has a lot of sediment, or some wines do benefit from decanting, but not that many.
Okay. All right. I'm going to ask you about your favorite wine book, but first show us your book on screen. So for those who are watching the video version, they can see it. For those who are listening, we will put a link in the show notes. So this is your beautiful book on Bandol and Mourvèdre. The Magic of Mourvèdre looks beautiful. And you want to do a little flip through the book. Are there any sort of maps or anything like that? Or pictures?
Yeah, we have a couple of maps in the beginning.
Okay.
But I have a lot of pictures like this of the interviews that I did with people.
Lovely vineyard shot with.
And then I have, as you mentioned before, the 25 wines that I like the most.
Oh, there they are. Yeah.
We did it like
the
this.
Bottles.
So
beautiful
my
shots.
wife took these beautiful pictures.
Oh,
yeah.
She is a photographer. That's lovely. My goodness. Those are beautiful pictures.
Thank you.
And you were saying, just while we're looking at the book, that people can order this directly from the publisher and get 40% off the price?
That's right. So if you go to Cambridge Scholars Publishing, which is the name of the publisher, and you go to their website and you go ahead and put the book into your basket, create an account just like you would on Amazon, for example. Then when you check out, you can put in a code. It says, discount codes, and you can put in Bandol, BANDOL 40. And you get a 40% discount.
Awesome. And we will definitely put that all in the show notes as well. And then also, do you have another favorite wine book that you've read?
Yeah, I guess I always think that the last wine book I read is the one I like the most.
Yeah.
So I've read so many good ones, but I recently read this one, big monster here.
Wow, on Burgundy. Beautiful cover. Big illustrated cover. What is it? 9 centuries in the heart of Burgundy. Is this about wine or the whole region, like as a whole?
Yeah, it's about this place called Cellier aux Moines, which means the cellar of the monks.
Oh.
And it's a vineyard in Givry in the south of Burgundy, in the Côtes Chalonnaises. And I had a little exchange with the owner of this winery. He bought the winery in 2004. He was a businessman before and he bought it, but he was very interested in the history of it. It's a 900-year-old history, and it was owned by monks, and the monks built walls around their vineyard and protected it and kept it going. And then it was privatized about 200 years ago. So the current owner was very interested in the history, and he teamed up with a French historian to write this book. And it's It has, of course, lots of beautiful illustrations
Wow.
like this.
Yeah, gorgeous grapes and vineyards.
If you want to know about the history of Burgundy and how the monks, the church, contributed to the development of wine, it's a great book for that.
Excellent. Again, we'll put it in the show notes. And do you have a favorite wine gadget?
Yes, I do. I brought it right here.
Okay.
Do you know what this is?
I do not. It looks like a little pedometer to measure your steps. What is that?
You got the last part of the word right. It's a thermometer.
Oh, okay. For your wine temperature?
Yeah, so what you do is put it into the glass, and you just push the button and it tells you temperature.
Okay, so you don't leave it in the glass or touch the wine, but just the temperature above in the air is going to tell you what your wine temperature is?
Yeah, so you can see there it's 23.5.
Okay.
And so it's quite accurate. You just point it directly at the wine. And I like this a lot because, for example, with the rosé wine today, before I came on to talk with you, I put it in the fridge and chilled it, took it out and poured a half a glass to make sure the wine was okay.
Yeah.
And I measured the temperature and it was 6.8 degrees.
Bit too
which
cold.
Is too cold. Right?
Yeah.
After 15 minutes, when I had finished tasting it and making some notes, it was 17.1 degrees, which is a little bit too warm.
Right.
So I think people are not always really aware or sensitive to temperatures. I mean, you see people putting on frozen sleeves on their whites and the rosés and chilling the heck out of it. That doesn't do it any service. And then with red wines, you see them often served at room temperature, but in the summer, that could be 25 or 26 degrees.
Yeah, you're right. Temperature is a big thing.
So I like this gadget.
Absolutely. And what?
I like this gadget for raising your awareness. That's all.
And is there a brand name or an official name for that thermometer?
Doesn't seem to be.
Okay, but it's made for wine, is it?
It is made for wine.
Purpose built?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Cool. And if you could share a bottle of wine with anyone, living or dead, who would that be and which wine would you open?
Yeah, I was thinking of writers because writers are always the people I like to talk to since I spend so much time researching them. Evelyn Waugh was a famous English writer.
Another misanthrope.
Another misanthrope. He didn't like anybody, but he liked champagne.
Yes.
And he famously said that he would drink champagne any time of the day or night with anything or without anything. So I'd like to have a glass of breakfast champagne with Evelyn Waugh.
Beautiful. Did he write Brideshead Revisited?
He did. Yeah.
Okay. And there's a famous wine scene in that. And they talk about Burgundy being a shy little thing. And like they go on and they open up because they're drinking from the parents' cellar. Yeah.
Exactly. It's a beautiful scene. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. Awesome. So yeah, he would be great. But maybe you could invite the other misanthropes and they could get into a big argument. Graham Greene and Kingsley Amos and Evelyn Waugh. If you could put up a billboard in downtown Tokyo, what would it say?
Oh, right now, if I could put it up right now, I would say, could you turn down the heat, please?
Oh, you want a billboard that the big guy in the sky might see.
Yeah, hopefully I pointed up that way. So it's about 36 degrees in Tokyo today.
Wow. Oh my gosh, that's intense.
Yeah.
Intense.
Too hot.
As we wrap up, is there anything that we haven't covered that you'd like to mention, Andy?
No, I think that's everything. Thank you very much for having me, Natalie. It was great talking with you, and I really appreciate it.
Oh, it's been a delight. Thank you. Great stories, great tips. And let's just regroup on how people can find you and your book online.
Yeah, so Cambridge Scholars Publishing is the name of the publisher.
Okay.
And if you go directly to their website, you can get a discount. I apologize for the book being expensive because it's an academic publisher. So they're targeting university libraries and not bookstores.
Sure.
So that's the reason for it. But you can at least get a 40% discount.
Yeah.
And if you'd like to talk with me or communicate with me or see what I'm drinking, you can go to Instagram, to Andy Wine 2021.
Okay.
So that's where you can find me.
Excellent, Andy. Well, I am going to say goodbye for now, but thank you. And I hope that we can chat again. We have lots of great stories to share, and I really appreciate this.
Thank you, Natalie.
Okay, cheers.
Okay, bye-bye.
Well, there you have it. I hope you enjoyed my chat with Andy. Here are my takeaways. Andy's explanation on why Bandol is the only wine region to lead with Mourvèdre was fascinating. As he said, there's a salinity and freshness in these wines. Good Mourvèdre has to see the sea, or even have its feet in it, meaning its vine roots. It gets the salinity and saltiness, And so that even though there's very little rain in Bandol, only about 400 or 500 milliliters a year, you get the wind blowing all the time, and there's a lot of wind that's carrying the salt from the sea, which goes over the grapes. So even though they don't get acidity naturally, because it's a very warm climate, they're still getting that freshness and salinity that's particular to the Bandol region. 2, I also enjoyed his description of the northern Italian grape and wine Barbaresco as well as Barolo and the changes that they're experiencing. And finally, he painted a terrific picture of what it's like to spend a day picking grapes in a Sauvignon Blanc vineyard. In the show notes, you'll find a full transcript of my conversation with Andy, links to his website and books, the video versions of these conversations on Facebook and YouTube Live, where you can order my book online, no matter where you live, and links to my 3 upcoming wine tasting and book launch events. That's all in the show notes at nataliemaclean.com/250. Email me if you have a sip, tip, question, or would like to win a copy of Andy's book, or if you've read my book or are in the process of reading it, at natalie@nataliemaclean.com. I would love to hear from you. If you missed episode 164, go back and take a listen. I chat with Robert Camuto, author of South of Somewhere, about Italy's wine, foods, and flavors. I'll share a short clip with you now to whet your appetite.
Wine back in the day wasn't something that it is now. It was an accompaniment. It wasn't the star of the table. When you look at southern Italy, there's so many darn flavors there and so much delicious, spicy food and fresh tomatoes, peppers, greens, artichokes. Maybe it's a little more difficult for wine to be the standout star of that.
Because the flavors are so intense.
There's so much else going on at the table, so much other intensity. Everybody loves Burgundy, but what does one eat in Burgundy? There's some nice boeuf bourguignon, there's some nice snails, but it's not the same thing as having pasta with sea urchins and clams and peppers and all the different sauces. They drank it as a food, as a very simple pairing, and did not savor wine to the extent that we do today.
If you liked this episode, please email or tell one friend about it this week, especially someone you know who'd be interested in the wines, tips, and stories we shared. You won't want to miss next week when we chat with Kara Fiera and Kala Bishkoff, hosts of the fun and irreverent podcast, The Boozy Biddies. Thank you for taking the time to join me here. I hope something great is in your glass this week. Perhaps a juicy, mouth-watering Barbaresco. You don't want to miss one juicy episode of this podcast, especially the secret, full-bodied bonus episodes that I don't announce on social media. So subscribe for free now at nataliemaclean.com/subscribe. Meet me here next week. Cheers.